Spiking is the covert administration of a substance, so drugs or alcohol, to another person without their knowledge or their consent. So the typical example that you'll probably be aware of is putting something in somebody's drink in a nightclub setting, that kind of thing, so putting drugs in someone's drink. But actually it also includes things like food spiking, so putting something in someone's meal, or a needle spiking, which is something that we've seen reported, so somebody injecting somebody else with a substance. The motivations behind spiking are really varied. So if you speak to perpetrators, they'll often say, oh, I was doing it for a laugh, I was trying to loosen people up, I just wanted to have a bit of fun, I wanted to loosen them up so that I could kind of interact with them better, that kind of thing. Some of them will admit to more sinister motivations, so they will openly say, oh yeah, I wanted to have sex with them, I wanted to assault them, I wanted revenge on them. But often people don't admit that. And spiking itself is an offence, but sometimes it is then followed by something else. And so the spiking offence facilitates that later offence by making somebody more susceptible, so they're easier to take away from their friends, for example. So the perpetrator is spiking their drink in order to then commit a serious sexual assault or perhaps to commit a robbery. There are loads of really excellent studies that look at spiking, but one of the challenges that I found was that actually they start with the follow-on offence when that happens. So for example, a drug-facilitated sexual assault or a robbery, and then they look backwards to see how many of those incidents involved something that we might consider to be that we would consider to be spiking. So the covert administration of a substance. And actually what that does is it misses all of these offences that are happening over here that don't result in a follow-on offence. So you get instances where people will say, oh, I think I was spiked, but then my friends found me throwing up in the toilets and they took me home and then I was safe. And so they then don't report those instances, or they don't turn up in the data that researchers are using to look at spiking. So you end up with this gap where we're kind of looking from the more serious to a more serious follow-on offence to the spiking incident, rather than looking at the spiking incident and seeing how many of those then result in a follow-on offence. Another challenge with the research is that even where you get, say, a positive blood test result or urine sample result, that doesn't necessarily automatically mean that a spiking incident has happened. So one of the biggest challenges is that people might have been consuming substances voluntarily. So for example, if I go out drinking with my friends, I'm consuming alcohol of my own volition. And so trying to separate that from the alcohol that somebody might put in my drink is really very difficult. And that's a real challenge for us in terms of the research, because if we don't ask victims what else they were taking, whether that be recreational drug use, medicines that they might be on, how much alcohol they've consumed voluntarily, that's very difficult then for us to unpick in their blood sample results what extra substances might be in their system. And so that's really difficult for us to then identify something as definitely spiking has happened, because there's a substance there that the victim has not taken, and so we definitely know that that's associated. And so it's really important for us to know this, because we need to know what substances are people using in order to commit their spiking offences. And so those blood tests are great, but they have to be combined with information about voluntary consumption for us to be able to have the full picture as to what's going on. So the first thing that you should do if you know somebody has been spiked, or you think that you've been spiked, is to seek help. So it's really important that you keep people safe. So first and foremost, call for medical assistance, tell the door staff if you're in a nightclub setting, for example, make sure that that person gets home safe. So it's ensuring that safety is first and foremost. That's the first thing that you can do. If you think that somebody's put something in your drink, another thing you could do is get a blood test, so blood or urine test, to see if there's something in your system. So it's going to a hospital, or if a follow-on assault has happened, a sexual assault referral clinic, for example, and having those samples taken. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to report immediately to the police, but it means that evidence is being gathered in those instances if something's happened. The next thing to do is we would encourage reporting, because from our point of view it's very difficult for us to really determine what's going on with spiking and understand the nature of spiking and then intervene in it if people are not telling us when they think they've been spiked. So sometimes people will wake up in the morning and think, oh, I think somebody spiked my drink, but I'm home and I feel okay. Actually, we still want to know about those things, because somebody has still committed an offence against you and other people are at risk. And so it would be really useful for us and important for us to have those instances reported to us. The police will take you seriously, and it is important that we gather as much information as we can so that we can then do some interventions and to protect people from spiking going forward. If you happen to witness somebody committing a spiking offence, even if they're saying they think it's for a laugh, call them out on their behaviour. It's not appropriate for people to be putting things in other people's drinks or buying them a double when they ask for a single, or putting some alcohol in their drink when they're not drinking that evening. So it's really important for us to take responsibility for the environment that we're in and actually call people out on their behaviour. If you don't feel safe doing that yourself, it may be that you could tell, if you're out in a nightclub, let the door staff know you think that somebody's putting something in people's drinks, because that then is making that environment safer for everybody.